Greetings, loyal listeners and any new ones. I am Brian Freidenborg, International Affairs, Development, and Public Policy Professional and freelance writer, journalist, consultant, and historian. And today is February 24th, and this is my first Calling It Like It Is podcast show in quite some time, and we're going to be dealing with the 2016 American presidential election, specifically the Democratic and Republican nomination contests. And as much as I want to be doing more projects concerning international affairs, there seems to be a bit more of a market right now for the political craziness back home. I say back home because I've been in Amman, Jordan for most of the last 2 years, a few trips to Israel and Palestine as well, but I haven't been back to the U.S. in almost exactly 2 years. But I'm still following what happens in my native land quite closely. And this is a wild one, folks. So let's get right into it. We'll start with the Republican side because why not start with the craziest stuff going on first? We really do have quite an interesting race here. And for months, we've been hearing many political pundits, experts, journalists, analysts saying, Donald Trump, no way. There's no way. There's just no way. It's not going to happen. No way. Well, ladies and gentlemen, back in August, if you do a search in Google for Don't Dismiss the Donald, and especially if you throw my name in there, but I think if you just do Don't Dismiss the Donald, my article that I wrote early in August is one of the first things that will come up. And frankly, I'm right. I was right, and I usually am right, to be honest, on this stuff, though not always. I'm not trying to brag. I'm just saying objectively, the way I've looked at a lot of these things have come to pass. So back then, I said that there were 4 main reasons why you shouldn't count Donald out and that you should take his candidacy seriously. For one thing, the Republican Party was in turmoil, and this was obvious before Trump even entered the race. There was a lot of anger at the establishment. Longtime Republican politicians have been vulnerable to attacks from their right, from Tea Party-supported people being primaried, as they would say, meaning they would lose in the primary and not be able to compete in the general elections. This happened to Richard Lugar, a senator from Indiana, for example. And that's one thing, okay? The party's in a state of turmoil, especially since the 2 losses to Obama. The other thing to consider is how divided the field was. There's now 5 candidates, but at one point there were 17 candidates. And that many candidates with one person in the lead who's so different from all the rest, it seems like the other 16 candidates were going to be competing among themselves. Because the person that's drawn to Donald Trump, even back then, people should be able to figure this out, isn't going to be like, well, maybe Ben Carson or Lindsey Graham or Jeb Bush. No. Donald Trump is more unique than any of the other candidates, arguably maybe than Ben Carson, but even so, Donald Trump is in his own class. And with all these candidates in the race, and Donald Trump at that point polling in high 20s, low 30s, and most other candidates in single digits, normally you'd have about 5 or 6 candidates, and people in the bottom would be, oh, what's the point of this after a little bit. But with so many people polling at 2, 3, 5%, why get out when if you go up a mere 5 points, you could be second or third in the race, right? And there's so many different candidates that there's not a huge advantage in fundraising for any one of them in terms of the middle and bottom tiers for the most part. And, even if the field winnowed significantly, this is what I was saying back in August, you're still going to have 10 or 9 or 8 candidates competing with Donald Trump who are going to be tearing each other apart, trying to catch up to him. And that's exactly what happened. And even now, where we are only down to 5, the dynamic is that these other candidates are hurting each other way more than they're hurting Trump. And that dynamic has continued, I would argue, and I think it's pretty obvious, to be frank, past the point now where there's any chance for anyone else to really rise and take him out. And more on that in a bit. But the third thing I mentioned is that the primary voters are themselves quite different than the average Republican even, and certainly than the average American. They're more extreme. They're more rabid and fervent. And so Donald Trump was going to have a better chance at winning the primary voter, who is Republican primary voter, who's older and whiter than the average Republican, older and whiter by far than the average American. So I was right about that. And then just the way that he is a master manipulator of the media in ways that no other candidate can match. And frankly, even going back to FDR and radio, I don't think there's been anyone who is so far ahead than everybody else in terms of how he can use the media to his advantage. Okay? So the party's changing. The field is very crowded, and it's hard to winnow the field in such a way that hurts Trump. And I wrote this back when there were 17 candidates. There's still 5. The same thing is true now. Okay? The primary voters are a unique breed, and Trump owns the media pretty much. I don't mean owns like he's a businessman who owns them, but just dominates coverage and everything else. And that goes to a very interesting point as well, that not enough people are talking about. They're talking about this a tiny bit here and there. I'm not seeing a whole lot of focus on this. All these other candidates have spent way more than Trump. If you add John Kasich, super PAC, even he raised and spent more than Trump. Now, if you don't include super PAC, Trump has raised more, or he spent more than Kasich. But if you include super PACs, no. And then definitely Rubio, Cruz, okay, and Carson have all raised way more money and spent way more money than Donald Trump. And Jeb Bush, who's out of the race, spent almost $150 million and where did it get him? His best finish was 4th place. That was his best. When everyone was saying, oh, he's got his mojo back and he's a better candidate now after months of being a terrible candidate. And he still just finished in 4th, and that was after he brought his mother, former First Lady Barbara Bush, and his brother, George W. Bush, to campaign for him in South Carolina. His mother also campaigned in New Hampshire, but his brother, a former president of the United States, came, who was very popular, 86% approval rating in South Carolina at the time. And he plugged for his brother, and it didn't help Jeb Bush at all. That's remarkable. The first time George W. Bush has done anything like this in the 7 years since he's been president, and has possibly no effect, at best a minimal effect. That's humiliating for the Bush family. It's humiliating for a former president to come out and to endorse and campaign for someone and to have no effect. That's pretty unprecedented, as there are many things this year in the contest. So Trump has won 3 out of 4 states. He came in quite close in Iowa, and it's Trump and Carson and Rubio are all talking about now. Cruz may have won or made that margin bigger, at least because of some dirty tricks campaigning, trying to take Ben Carson's voters from him by telling his supporters that Ben Carson had left the presidential race, which was not true. It was a lie. And they keep going to this report by CNN, which never said that, so they're full of it. And that was the first contest, and that was a long time ago. The last 3 contests now, okay, the Cruz won in Iowa, barely. Maybe not barely, but wasn't a huge win, okay? And he didn't get nearly as much of the evangelical vote as he would have liked, though he got more than anybody else. But then you've got Trump in New Hampshire, Trump in South Carolina, and Trump in Nevada, winning each by big double-digit margins, okay? This is a guy who was not spending millions of dollars in any of these places, unlike, not nearly as much anyway, as his main competitors. None of them. Rubio spent more than anybody else in Nevada, and he came in a distant second to Trump. Trump almost doubled Rubio's support in Nevada just now, okay? He did manage to come in a distant second in South Carolina as well, after he was further down behind Cruz, but that was with the popular governor, Nikki Haley, the Republican governor there, and Lindsey Graham, Republican senator. Actually, I'm sorry, Lindsey Graham had endorsed Bush, but Nikki Haley endorsed Rubio. And that still only got him to a distant second in South Carolina. So, in case it's not obvious, what I'm going to say is Trump has this. There's just no way to stop him at this point, pending or barring a miracle. And why do I say that? He's won 3 of the first 4 contests. He's won the last 3 contests. Each of those contests he's won by big margins. He's won in geographically diverse areas. The Northeast, the South, the West. Okay? None of his competitors were even close to him in those contests. He took Ted Cruz's demographic from him. He won more evangelicals in Nevada than anybody else, and in South Carolina. That's huge for Ted Cruz, who's kind of second in many ways at this point, but Rubio's probably going to end up edging him in that regard to take second away from him. But what do we have here? We have Super Tuesday coming up in about a week, March 1st. So this is where Trump could have been defeated. Rubio does very well in New Hampshire. Maybe he's a strong second to Trump. Builds momentum going into South Carolina. Perhaps wins South Carolina, or even if he doesn't win it, comes in a very close second to Trump there. And goes on in the Super Tuesday, in Nevada. He's able to really compete with Trump in Nevada because of all the momentum and money and support he's going to be gaining from these good performances in Nevada and in New Hampshire and South Carolina. So he does better in Nevada than he did in real life. And then he goes into Super Tuesday with a lot of momentum and the win in his back and, really just in a good position to at least make it a competitive fight. What happened instead is Chris Christie exposed Marco Rubio for the shallow, weak, thin candidate that Rubio is. Rubio is obviously very bright, but if you read an interesting New York Times piece on him, and if you read this whole thing about his spending on the GOP credit card scandal, there's something a bit cavalier and immature about him. And if you followed him at all closely, whether it's him doing that State of the Union response a few years back, the ridiculous antics with the water bottle, if you're talking about his performance during the Iran hearings when he showed a shocking amount of ignorance of foreign policy, even at the debates, he just throws out talking points. He just doesn't have a whole lot of depth and substance. Yes, he's bright, but he really doesn't understand these issues well. He doesn't have any gravitas. He has not made much of a reputation for being a hard worker and getting things done in the Senate. He's just a very lightweight candidate. The fact of the matter is he's Hispanic and Republican and articulate. Boom, that makes him a big deal because Republicans are desperate after 2008 and 2012 to win any single gender or race demographic that isn't whites or males. Republicans won whites and Republicans won males. They didn't win a single other demographic. They lost women. They lost every minority group. They won white women, but if you look at just the groups by themselves, gender or ethnicity or race, Republicans have a math problem. They either expand and win more women or minorities, or they are going to lose every presidential election for the foreseeable future. We saw that in 2012, and that was a trend that started in 2008. So, yes, they're desperate for someone like Rubio. That's why Fiorina briefly rose to popularity within Republican ranks as well, until they realized what a horrible candidate she was and what a horrible record she had as a CEO, because they need more women as well. They have a very thin bench when it comes to women, unlike Democrats. But, Rubio could have won this contest, or he would have won the nomination. He could have been very competitive with Trump if he had not done so horribly in that New Hampshire debate. And people are going to go back and they're going to say that's the moment when Rubio's candidacy fell apart. That's what I said. If you check the piece I wrote, you can search my name and type in Rubio, and it should come up. Rubio had given that very smart speech in Iowa, being very close to Trump as number 3. He was going in with a lot of momentum into New Hampshire. Ironic from a third-place finish, but he spun it well. And Chris Christie just destroyed Rubio. He just destroyed him in that debate. And he exposed him for what he is, a weak, shallow candidate. And there's just no recovering for him for that. And the idea that he comes in something like 10 points behind Trump in South Carolina with Nikki Haley's support, the popular sitting governor. Imagine how different that would have been if he hadn't collapsed in New Hampshire down to 5th place. He fell down to 5th place in New Hampshire because of that debate performance. People said in the polling that they had just made their decision, and that was why, one of the reasons they didn't support him, more or less. So instead of having a strong second-place finish in New Hampshire, which he was poised to do, he comes in 5th, and he comes in a second place, 10 points behind Trump in South Carolina. Definitely not what he wanted. And it goes into Nevada and loses big there, too, even though it's second place. So Rubio was done, in my opinion, with that debate in New Hampshire because there just wasn't going to be the way for him to build the momentum he needed going into Super Tuesday. And Trump was way ahead in all those contests, and he stayed ahead and won by 10 points, at least in each, double-digit margins in New Hampshire, in South Carolina, and now in Nevada. So now we have a whole bunch of states voting Tuesday, a quarter of the delegates there at stake. Trump's up in almost every single one of them. There were a couple polls that have Rubio slightly up, or at least within striking distance of Trump, but those are taken before Nevada. And I think I'm saying it wrong. Those were taken before then, and some of them were taken just before, just after, with overlap in all those areas, South Carolina. So they weren't really able to measure the impact of the distant second place and the big first place finish for Rubio and Trump, respectively. So now we're going into Super Tuesday, and Trump could win every single state. He's going to almost certainly win almost every single state. But the idea that Rubio, who is not consistently led in any of these states, is going to do well, especially after this disappointing performance, I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. No matter how much the establishment's into now, no matter how many rational Republicans are looking at Rubio and saying, yes, Rubio. You can say as much as you want. Rubio is coming 5th. He's coming 3rd, he's coming 5th, he's coming 2nd, and he's coming 2nd. That's not a winning path to a nomination. I'm just sorry. It just isn't. He's way behind Trump in delegates. And Cruz, obviously Cruz is not going to get it. The establishment hates him. Most of America hates him. He's very divisive. He's getting stuck with this liar tag quite accurately, I might imagine, where Carson, Cruz, and Trump are all calling him a liar, as they should. And, Trump and Cruz keep getting about the same amount of the vote in a lot of places, and even if they combined in Nevada now, they still would have lost to Trump. So this is pretty remarkable. And there's just really no way to stop Trump at this point. If they had coalesced behind someone, Republicans had coalesced behind somebody before this period, but I think even going to South Carolina was too late, but I think there was a shot. And it didn't happen. And Trump gave them all this ammunition. He attacked George W. Bush. He said he lied, and he lied about weapons of mass destruction going into Iraq. He said that Planned Parenthood and Obamacare had some good things about them. He got into a fight with the Pope. You can't make this stuff up. This happened just days before, and he still won by 10 percentage points. It's truly amazing. Yes, Donald Trump would have beaten both Cruz and Rubio's combined total in Nevada. Just wanted to throw that out there. Just wanted to confirm that, But anyway, it's just too late. I really don't see any way that Rubio magically starts winning a whole bunch of states, especially after this last performance. And when there's so many states voting and momentum's going to count so much, and all the momentum is with Donald Trump, I just don't see it happening. Now, here's something you're not going to hear anywhere else. I think John Kasich has the best chance of coming in second in the delegate count. And I think if there's anyone, as remote as the possibility would be, if anyone's going to knock off Trump, I think it's going to be him. Now, how does this happen? Ohio is winner take all. He's the very popular sitting governor there. And Kasich has a chance to take a few states like Massachusetts and Vermont that are moderate, that are voting coming up on Super Tuesday. If he can win even one of those states, he gets to say, oh, I won a state now. I'm not the only one who's won this. Cruz is not the only one who's won a state. Rubio hasn't won anything yet. I finally won something now. And if he goes all out in Ohio, he gets all those delegates. It's a very large state in terms of population. And, it's almost 100 delegates. And then there's a chance in the big states that come much later, like New York and California, where moderate Republicans could unite behind him, give him a bunch of delegates, and make things interesting. I still don't think he's going to have more delegates than Trump then, even if that happens. I don't think he's going to get the nomination, but it would be quite interesting. If Trump didn't have enough delegates, it might force him to think of to win outright, but he had the most, and Kasich had the second most. A Trump-Kasich ticket, which I think would be smart, honestly, for the Republicans, regardless of how Kasich performs. Because it gives them a very, very good chance of winning Ohio, much better than I think Rubio would give the Republicans a chance of winning Florida. So anyway, Kasich, if he is able to save his resources and go all out in some states like Vermont, Massachusetts, to build up momentum to going into Ohio a few weeks later, and he wins Ohio outright, the moderates will flock to him, and he will be competitive, probably even if that happens in New York and California, which have a lot of delegates at stake. I just don't see Rubio doing well. I really just don't. Everyone seems to think he has a chance, but I really don't know. What state is he going to win, folks? What state is he certain or almost certain to win? You can't give me one state that he's at least almost certain to win. And one other thing I would like to point out is that a lot of these primaries are proportional with either a 15 or a 20% threshold. So unless Rubio and others perform very well and get at least 15 or 20% in many of these states, okay, they're not going to get any delegates, and Trump will get all those delegates. So he's going to build up such a big margin, and they're going to have so few delegates between Cruz and Rubio. It's going to be pretty obvious, I think. I think it's going to be obvious, honestly, as of March 8th, that Trump is almost certain to win. But watch Kasich. It's going to say a lot about the Rubio and Cruz candidacies that Kasich is the one who ends up coming in second with the most delegates. I think the non-Trump people are going to be finding Kasich by far the most appealing. Every time he spends time somewhere, he tends to do better. So let's see. I give Kasich a shot at Massachusetts, Vermont, and especially Ohio. But we'll see. Trump may just dominate everybody, and that might not even happen. On the Democratic side, things are a bit simpler, but let's go into that now. I haven't been shy about this at all. If you Google Bernie Sanders delusional map, you will see my article, one of my best performing in my career, over 32,000 views now. That's 32,000. I'll brag a little bit. Where this whole thing with Sanders has really, really gotten to me, really annoyed me, actually offended me deeply. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I think Bernie Sanders is a great guy. I loved him as a senator. I remember his epic takedown of Michelle Bachmann live on CNN, which was a wonderful thing to watch. You can see a link to it in my article, or find a link to it in my article. I like what he stands for. I like that he's passionate. I like the issues he talks about. I'm with him on most things. I think it's utterly disgusting that he has tried to basically paint Hillary Clinton as this soulless, corrupt Wall Street hack in order to fuel his candidacy. I think that is just so incredibly unfair to Hillary Clinton, who has had such a long, distinguished career, where she went to a great law school and could have gone and done whatever she wanted when she was a young girl, and she went to help desegregate the South. She went to help register Latinos in Texas in 1972 to campaign for Barry Goldwater. She helped children and distressed families. I mean, this was a woman who did that and didn't go get a job at a top law firm, which she could have. And then her fight over health care in the 90s and the abuse that she took from that, and the abuse that she took as First Lady. And she didn't give up. She always came back. And more than anything Sanders has done in his career until far later, recently with the Veterans Affairs Bill he co-authored with John McCain and got passed, Hillary Clinton in the late 90s got some 8 million kids over the course of the next, the following years, health insurance with the state children's health insurance program, even after her quote-unquote Hillary Care thing had failed. So I think, especially these young Bernie supporters, the Bernie bros, whatever you want to call them, that are just tweeting all this horrible stuff about Hillary Clinton, is that she's no different than Republicans and is just completely corrupt and won't do anything for anybody, only cares about herself. That's just nonsense. You look at this woman's career, that's nonsense. And they're so young, they don't even have a memory of it. And that's fine. But if you're going to say stuff about someone, do your homework or just shut up. I'm sorry. If you're going to spew ignorant things and characterize a few speeches for Goldman Sachs and taking money from Wall Street in campaigns. She was a senator from New York. She developed relationships with Wall Street after 9/11, I might add, when the whole economy was hurting and we needed Wall Street to help pick us back up. And then obviously things went really bad, but that's not her fault that the economic crises developed at the end of the Bush years, okay? Look, she does take money from big banks, sure. That doesn't prove anything. Obama took money from big banks, from Citigroup, for example, and he fined Citigroup billions of dollars once he was president. So, hate the game, don't hate the player, okay? And Hillary's been up front for quite some time now, going into last year, about wanting a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. And if you want to remember the details, Citizens United was a case about campaign spending in which this group, Citizens United, was putting out a movie that was trying to defame and slander Hillary Clinton because she was running for president. The right wing obviously feels very threatened by her. They'd much rather face Sanders. Sorry, that's one thing. That really got me. The way Bernie Sanders has treated Clinton, although he's very indirect about it, he's smart. But she said to him at one of the previous debates, if you got something to say, say. Because either you think I'm corrupt and I am, or stop talking about the fact that I took money from Wall Street and talk about what I've actually done in my career. So there's that. There's the way his followers treat her. But this is the even worse part about Sanders and his campaign for me. They have no data to support any remote idea that they can actually do anything they're saying. And this exists on several levels. So he has his 3 pillars of his program is the free college for all, is single-payer health care, and a massive tax increase, especially on the wealthy, but also significant tax increases on the middle class to pay for them. Now, the tax increases simply will not pass Congress. And the idea that we're just going to change Congress and change hearts and minds, I'm sorry, but as I mentioned in my article, very few of these House races are even competitive. The House of Representatives is virtually certain to remain in Republican hands, and probably by a significant margin, even if we gain some seats. There's still the issue with the Senate, of course, but the House initiates all the budgets. So if they aren't going to pass and initiate legislation, if they aren't going to pass Sanders' tax increase, his whole agenda falls apart. But he keeps selling this as if it's going to happen. And all these Bernie Sanders people are like, well, maybe it'll happen. You don't know. Yes, we do know, because we look at polling and we find that 47 out of 50 states have more people that say that they are conservative than say that they are liberal. And those people are not going to be for Bernie Sanders' socialism, for tax increases, and for a single-payer healthcare system. Neither are moderates, let alone conservatives. Yes, liberals are for single-payer, but we're just not able to do that at this stage in time. It's something that I want us to do eventually. Yes. Who's going to get us closer to that? Hillary Clinton. She's going to build on Obamacare and get that, and people will see that Obamacare works over time, and they'll start to change their mind. But no one's ready for single-payer health care outside of Bernie Sanders' core of followers right now. And if we campaign on that, we're going to scare people who are undecided or in the middle, and we're going to set these causes back. And they have no data to support that either their programs are workable, because the math is in serious dispute behind his programs, that they're passable, and he's just not electable. The guy vacationed with his wife to the Soviet Union for his honeymoon. Republicans are going to be all over this. We're still more of a capitalist country than we are a socialist country, and I'm happy these young 18-year-olds who barely know a thing about politics are so excited about this and are open to socialism, but they don't speak for the majority of the country, let alone the majority of Democrats. And I'm glad this fad's going to fade, because here's what happened. There are whites and liberals, and white liberals, basically, to get the combined trait. The combination is what forms Sanders' core of support. The whitest, most liberal state in the country, if you look at a really great chart done by 538, is Vermont. That's Bernie Sanders' home state. It explains why he's been able to win the Senate as a socialist. He's not even a member of the Democratic Party, ladies and gentlemen. Let's remember that. Okay? So he does well in that state. The second whitest, most liberal state is New Hampshire, which he won. The third whitest, most liberal states are tied for Iowa and Massachusetts. So those are the four states where Bernie's likely to do the best. Okay? Based on demographics anyway. Now, if we look at the fact that, yes, he won Iowa by a lot, great, that's good for him. He should have. If he's going to win anything, I said Iowa before, sorry. He won New Hampshire by a lot. If he's going to win anything, Vermont and New Hampshire are 1 and 2. Then his number 3 and 4 are tied, okay? Iowa and Massachusetts. Well, he barely lost Iowa. He came close, but he didn't win it. And that's a state that's supposed to be incredibly favorable to him. So he didn't win that. And now he's tied with Hillary in the latest poll in Massachusetts. If you're barely losing and tying in the third and fourth, basically tied for third most favorable states towards you, you're not a viable candidate, and you're not going to win elsewhere. You're not broadening your support, and you don't have a chance. And what happened after New Hampshire was a chance for Sanders to really, really build minorities voter support, blacks and Latinos. And he had a chance. He tried, and it was a decent effort. It wasn't a spectacular effort, and Hillary did a more than sufficient job of playing defense, as we saw in Nevada, where she won, and not just by barely winning, but she won by over 5%, and we're still waiting on a few precincts. It might be closer to 6%. We're still not sure. And he lost bad with Latinos, and there's been some talk of these exit polls that showed he did better with Latinos. I'm sorry, I meant to say he did bad with African Americans. He did bad with African Americans, very bad, and then some evidence suggests he did okay with Latinos, may have won them, but then the preponderance of evidence suggests that's actually not the case. You can look at my articles on Sanders and see more information about that. But basically, he didn't broaden his coalition. And he's heading into South Carolina, where Hillary has a commanding lead because she's very popular with the black population there. He's even not doing nearly as well with young blacks as he is with young whites. And she's almost certainly going to win South Carolina. And so she will have won 2 in a row. She will have demonstrated that Sanders has not been able to expand his coalition going into Super Tuesday. And where's he going to win in Super Tuesday? Yes, Vermont. He's way up in Vermont. Is he going to win anywhere else? Not likely. She's got huge leads in almost every state, and even the rest she's close to. He's not beating her anywhere in these other states other than his home state of Vermont. So going into the most important days of this nomination contest, when the most states are at stake, going into states that look a lot more like Nevada and especially South Carolina, because there's a lot of states in the South that are up for grabs. Sanders, maybe he'll win Massachusetts and Vermont, but it doesn't seem like he's going to win anything else. And it's going to be close in Massachusetts. And he's going to get crushed everywhere else. So, I mean, look, nice try, Bernie, but that's it. The math isn't on your side. It's just not going to happen. You lost your last real shot by not doing better in Nevada. So it's going to be Clinton-Trump. And you look at the two defining moments now of this race on both sides. You have Marco Rubio's basically getting his ass kicked by Chris Christie in the debate in New Hampshire, just before the New Hampshire contest. That is the moment where Rubio blew it, and Rubio was the only real shot to derail Trump. Unless, of course, Cruz somehow had won in South Carolina on the backs of evangelicals, but even then Cruz was a long shot because he's not popular anywhere else. So even if Trump had lost South Carolina to Cruz, I still think Trump was going to have it. But look, it was sealed for Trump and done for Rubio at that debate in New Hampshire, thanks to Chris Christie. And in Nevada, Hillary staved off Bernie's chance to build momentum going into South Carolina, to close the gap in South Carolina, to build support among African Americans. That did not happen. He's going to get trounced in South Carolina, and that was his only hope, was to do much better in South Carolina than he was supposed to, and to use that to build momentum going into Super Tuesday, create real doubts about Clinton with core constituencies like African Americans, Latinos, and that just hasn't happened because she did very well in Nevada with those groups. Yes, the exit poll has some questionable data on Latinos, but if you look at the precincts that were heavily Latino, they voted for Hillary by big margins. And Hillary and Trump are both up in most of these contests coming up on March 1st and all the other states coming up soon after by double digits. So, and sometimes not just tens, but in the 20s or 30s. So it's over. It was nice while it lasted for Sanders, and Rubio had his moment in the sun, his brief moment in the sun, but it's over. So anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. But you can check out my articles if you are desperate to hear more and see the data that I've been going over. But it's all my articles, and thank you so much for following as usual. Until next time, have a nice day. And remember, you heard it here first. Kasich has the best chance of getting the second most delegates, and it's going to be Trump Clinton now, almost certainly, no matter what Kasich does. Anyway, see you guys soon.